Welcome back, Exerciser, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are having an open conversation about a really interesting headline that I read earlier today. And I thought this would be a really fun topic to discuss on our podcast. So Julie actually doesn't know what we're going to be discussing. I'm going to throw the ball her way and just see kind of where this goes. So the email that I received with the headline was, combining mindfulness with exercise could be the key to feeling fitter and happier in 2024. And what this article was describing was a research study that was conducted where the researchers did a whole systematic review of a bunch of different articles and studies that were looking at the combination of both physical activity and mindfulness and the effects overall on happiness levels. And I thought this was a really interesting conversation and topic to kind of, this is our second episode of the new year, but to, more or less kick off the new year with, because I know mental health is a really big thing for a lot of people. I know that, wanting to feel happier is a really big thing. And we know that exercise can certainly help with that. We know mindfulness can help with that. But the combination of the two really isn't discussed unless you're in the world of yoga, unless you're in the world of Pilates, Tai Chi. But what was particularly interesting is these authors, these researchers, actually excluded all studies that included yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. Excluded all of those and just looked at the combination of physical activity and then mindfulness. So Julie, when you hear this idea of mindfulness and exercise and its effects on mental health, happiness, what's kind of the first impression that you get of this whole concept? Do you think it's something worth exploring?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I was thinking, I was like, well, of course they're happier. Well, I think that you and I are well exposed to when people are regularly exercising, it drastically changes their mental health. We know that. We've talk to mental health experts, even on this podcast, talking about how it helps with depression and your whole mood in general, anxiety, things like that. But adding in this idea of mindfulness into it, I think is really interesting, because from my perspective, I think mindfulness is kind of like a filter. Mm-hmm. It's like you develop a filter, which I think a lot of us have negative experiences in our life, stressors or things that drive us crazy, things that fill our schedule with things that we don't want to do because of lack of filtering, right? And so when I think of mindful, or when you were kind of, giving us a little overview of this paper, I was thinking, oh, well, people are now applying their own personal filter by being mindful. And I think that the more that people are being mindful, the more that people are making decisions that work best for them. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that stresses people out and takes them away from feeling joy and happiness is often doing things that they feel is necessary or mandatory or they can't say no to, but they don't really want to do them. Mm-hmm. And they feel like they can't not. Right? And so I think so often, if we were more mindful, a lot of us would exercise way more. Mm-hmm. And we would make better decisions when we exercise. And we would be getting injured less when we exercise, not just like a checklist item. So that's kind of where my thought process was going when you were describing it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you brought that up, because actually one of the things that the researchers hypothesized was there may have been this combination effect between the exercise, which, like you're saying, we've said before, can help positively influence mental health, and mindfulness practice, which can help positively influence mental health. But they're saying there may be some overlapping mechanisms between the two, where when you're exercising, you may be more in a state where you are ready to be mindful. When you are being mindful, you may be more in a state where you are open to the idea of exercising. And so then they're able to just kind of help fuel each other, and you're able to stick with both longer and everything like that. What I thought was super interesting about it was, like I said, kind of in the overview, is a lot of times when we think about mindfulness and exercise, the first thoughts that come up are yoga, are Pilates, are Tai Chi, things like that. But those were actually explicitly excluded from the study, which meant that some people had to be doing things other than yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. They had to be doing, lifting weights or running or doing group classes or things like that. Okay, things that more times than not are not inherently mindful. A lot of times people go in with more or less a mindless attitude, but by taking that physical activity and then applying the mindfulness practice outside of there, they were able to see kind of greater improvements in happiness and everything like that throughout the course of the different studies that they reviewed. So I thought that was really interesting. Where I think is for me, like a big question is, okay, what if you actually combine the mindfulness practice like during the resistance training, during the running, during the group class, which is something that we talk about a lot. And to me, I'm like, I don't know, I just feel like it just continues to strengthen our argument of like, okay, yeah, like this paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it is a really, really big thing.
Right. Well, when you were saying that, I was thinking exactly that. Like, when you're mindful, like if I sent you into like a group class and was like, Charlie, I want you to be mindful of your workout today. And, let's say you weren't the person you are right now, but you were just a regular exerciser that, it just goes to the gym. You would be like, okay. And it's almost like we accept that. But if I said, what exactly were you mindful of? You probably would list some random things. And then the next person would list some random things. And then the next person would list some random things. And not that those random things were bad, but you might have been like, I was really focusing on how my heel was rolling on the floor. And the next person might have been like, I was really focusing on my breath work when I was working out. And the next person might have said, I was really focused in on loving myself and the mental self-talk that could be, mindfulness to them. And so there's such a wide array of mindfulness that could be applied to exercise. And like you were saying, our Exercise for Life principles kind of hone you in on, so what are some key principles that you definitely need to be mindful of when you're exercising for these types of results of changing your health, changing your well-being and physical health.
Yeah.
That is really cool. And it would be interesting. We should get the researchers to study people that exercise our way to see how does that change your mental health.
Yeah, well, what was interesting is while you were describing that, you were describing all different things that were happening like within the person. And I thought, I wonder if a lot of times when people think they're being mindful, about actually, like, I'm going to apply mindfulness, their focus is being mindful on what's going on around them.
Yeah.
So like, okay, yeah, like I was really picking up like the energy of the class or the music that was going on or, the vibe there or, I was really focused on my form or, things like that. All the things that was okay, well, like those are fine and well, but really like when it comes down to making sure that you're able to exercise consistently and making sure that your workouts leave you feeling healthier and stronger and able to come back to doing them, taking that kind of almost external mindfulness and really focusing it on what's going on within your body and those specific things that we lay out, that really is a big deal. So you're absolutely right. Like people can be mindful about what's going on within their body, but that aspect of almost like that skill of mindfulness, it needs to be honed and applied in, again, like in the right direction towards the right things, in order to have it be as effective as it could be from a health perspective, from an exercise consistency perspective, and from an exercise results perspective. Again, like focusing on your muscles, focusing on you controlling your moving and non-moving segments, things like that.
Yeah. I think it's such a good point because too, like the education around mindfulness when we exercise, again, when we say mindfulness and exercise, you probably think of something like a yoga class, a Pilates class. And I love that they excluded those because then that really got to see, well, is this exclusive to mindful exercise? The stuff we label as mindful exercise, right? Like the yoga and Pilates. And it's clearly not, because we can change and your mental health will change and your perception of happiness will change when you're being mindful and when you're regularly exercising. So I love that they excluded that specifically because I think in our brains we think like work my body and then go be mindful. And then work my body and then go be mindful. And like you were saying, when we work our body, we're almost on this mission to disengage. But what's so interesting is that, you wrote about this in your book, Charlie, is that when we exercise, I'm going to, just correct me if I'm wrong, but anyways, we have a higher level and ability to make decisions. Like our decision creativity brain, our upper level thinking is like activated.
Your executive function.
Function, right? And so I could be completely wrong on this, but in my perspective of my understanding of survival is happiness is not part of surviving. And I was thinking like survival brain and like fulfillment brain are very different. And again, I'm not like a brain scientist, but I would assume that happiness, fulfillment would be in that higher order executive type brain area, not in the survival mode, stress mode, response mode. And so when I think about exercise, just knowing what I know, which I don't think a lot of people think this about exercise, it pushes you into that higher order executive type thinking, that prefrontal cortex type thinking that's very unique to humans. But also when you're mindful, think about how your mind changes. Like if you've ever taken a moment just to sit there and be mindful, it's very easy to get your brain to shift out of that stress response, out of that survival response that we really don't need in this day in life. I mean, I guess sometimes we do, but it's not common, right? We get into these stress response like, oh my gosh, what if I open my email? Or what if I look at my bank account? It's not threatening your life, but we feel threatened. And so it's easy to sit and be mindful and then get your brain into that higher order thinking of like, I can be grateful, I can be present, I can, get into that creative process. But it's funny that both of those do that. And I don't think a lot of us think exercise necessarily does that. We almost think like exercise just clears my brain. But really, it helps you use your brain in a different way. Yeah,
absolutely. And part of that clearing is definitely allows you to then be focused on the things that you want to be focused on. If you have 100 pieces on the metaphorical playing board and you're able to remove 99 of them, it cleared the board, but it also allows you to get kind of laser focused on the thing that you're wanting to do, which then if, part of feeling unhappy or overwhelmed or anxious or whatever is feeling like there's too much going on or whatnot, like that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. So Julie, when you have a new client coming in, all right, in the first few times that you're working with them, what are some things that you kind of help them through as far as allowing them, or like strategies that you give them as far as helping them to become more mindful while they're exercising?
Okay, so I think, have you ever heard of that saying, like, meet people where they're at, right? And so a lot of times when we think about exercise, it's all been external focused. So I actually usually start there. And so one of our exercise for life principles is move slowly, which is an external goal, like move your body slowly. And so it's interesting how quickly that shifts people. They don't even realize how quickly they are moving. But one of the best ways to be more mindful when you exercise, at least what I've seen, that's easy to like digest in your brain, is to move slower. And the amount of attention that you're going to be like, holy wow, I didn't even know all this stuff was happening because now I'm just went from moving fast to moving slow, is incredibly eye-opening for a lot of people. They don't even realize, and then the comments that I get is interesting. So I always start there, actually with the external, to take it more internal. It's like, let's slow this down. Let's actually feel this exercise. And most of the time, remember, we're trying to not feel exercise. So for the first time, a lot of people are like really experiencing the exercise. And that's where I usually start. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think that really is the place to start. It's like, all right, let's move a little bit slower, and let's making sure. And then once we get that kind of control down from a speed perspective or tempo perspective, then it's like, okay, let's make sure that we're also doing it throughout a motion that is symptom free. And usually, like symptoms, people are able to pick up on pretty quickly. And it's usually easier for people to notice, okay, yeah, like it bothers me when I go there, but it bugs me when I go there. And so like, okay, cool. We're going to move slowly within the part of the range of motion for you that is symptom free. And then I feel like from there, then we can start playing around with more like focusing on the muscle squeeze. But that really is a skill that for some people takes months or even years to really make like strong mind muscle connections and feel like they can really access those muscles on demand. And so That's not the place where I recommend people starting. I think the speed really is number one, and then from there, making sure that you are moving slowly within your symptom-free full range of motion. Making sure that you're not having any areas that are bothering you while you're doing the exercise. And then once you got that down, then I think you have a little bit more leeway to start playing with, okay, let me focus on, that muscle squeeze and dial that in.
As you're describing that, Charlie, staying in your pain-free range of motion, obviously we talk about that a lot. But I thought, well, maybe people are happier when they're mindful when they exercise because they get injured less.
Yeah, right?
I mean, I have to tell you, the amount of times, so we do personal training at MAT here, so a lot of people seek out MAT when they're uncomfortable, and their mental state, when you're uncomfortable, is not so hot.
Right. Yeah,
sometimes.
that's true.
I mean,
it's
some
so
people
true.
handle it well, some people don't, but it's never going to be as sharp and as high as when you're not feeling uncomfortable. And many people's exercise literally leads them to injury, regular soreness, regular achiness, regular icing all your joints, regular all this and that. That is really, it's like too much wearing on your body without, so when we think about exercise, we're always wanting to get the biggest benefit with the least risk, right? And so I think the more and more that we're mindful, no matter how you describe that, of course, Charlie and I have our opinions on how it should be done, but it's the less likely that you're going to have the negative, repercussions of the exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So if you are looking to take your fitness, take your health, take your mental health in a positive direction in 2024, really build on everything that you did in 2023 and take things to a new level. Yes, you need to make sure you're exercising. Yes, doing mindfulness training outside of exercise can certainly be helpful as well, as this paper showed. But the combination of the two, when you are doing your resistance training, when you are doing your cardio, whatever it is, when you're doing your group classes, really making sure that you are being mindful of what's going on within your body. Not only will it help keep you safer from an exercise perspective, it will help reinforce all the mindfulness work that you're doing outside of your workouts, which in our hypothesis, we're theorizing is that will lead to, again, better mental health results overall, because that's just going to be a stronger combination of the two. Again, it's not a claim that that's absolutely going to happen, but just kind of seeing what we've seen with people when they let me say this, that is a trend that we've seen when people really start to incorporate, again, the 4 Exercise for Life principles, which helps you be super mindful while you're doing your strength training, while you're doing your cardio. So that is our recommendation for you today. If you would like our guidance in helping you to do that, we have our entire Exercise for Life membership set up specifically to help you do that. We show you exactly where to start with what we call your success path, which walks you through our 4 Exercise for Life principles and gives you very specific workouts teaching you how to incorporate those 4 principles. So by the time you get through all 4 of those, you have 16 workouts under your belt, really practicing those Exercise for Life principles, and then the whole rest of the membership opens up for you where you can go and apply those principles to all those other workouts. So if you want to give that a shot, we're actually right now giving away a 30-day free trial for a limited time. So if you want to get in on that, all you have to do is go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com to get signed up. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is interested in helping themselves feel happier during 2024, improving their mental health and improving their physical health overall while they're doing it as well? Share this episode with them so they can understand that there's a lot of legitimacy to this idea of not only doing mindfulness training and physical activity, but the combination of the two with your resistance training, with your cardio, may allow you to get better benefits from both overall. And while you're online, head on over to your podcast platform of choice and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.